Welcome back, everybody, to Niners Now, and thank you to Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring this video. I'm your host, Brady Grustas, at GrustasBrady on X. You can follow me there, and you can scan this QR code right here if you want to check out Underdog. Yesterday was the annual end-of-year press conference for Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, and as always, there's plenty to talk about with that presser, and we'll get into it today. But of course, stick around until later in the show, because for the first time, I'm going to go over the biggest needs for the 49ers heading into the offseason. Of course, before we begin, go ahead and subscribe down below. The support has been really great recently, so please leave a like, leave a comment. Once again, huge shout out to Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring the video, and let's get into it. So with these annual end-of-year press conferences, they're not really a ton of specifics usually, and it makes sense, right? We're very early. We're technically not into the offseason yet. The Super Bowl hasn't happened yet. We don't even know who's playing in the Super Bowl. So there's a lot that will still change over the coming months or so. But for the 49ers, it's all about, starting to look ahead. But today was yesterday, I should say. You guys are seeing this the next day. The press conference was one kind of final look back at the 2025-2026 49ers team. Lynch and Shanahan, they talked about the rookie class quite a bit. Kind of reading between the lines here, seems like stock up for Jordan James. Kyle Shanahan seemed really excited about Jordan James going into next season. In fact, he said as much. And he said that he was frustrated that Jordan James didn't get more opportunities. And I've seen some people online kind of getting on him for this because it's like, oh, you're the head coach. If you want him to get opportunities, you should give him opportunities. I think that's intentionally a little bit obtuse. Like, if it's clear that Jordan James is probably the third best running back on the team, and the third best running back on the team doesn't get a whole lot of opportunities. If he was the second best running back on the team, that'd be something else, right? But he's not. Brian Robinson was better, at least this year, at least for most of this year, right? And so we'll see what Jordan James looks like next year, but you're not going to force a guy to play just because he's a rookie, Like, why are you, you can't be forcing snaps for a 5th round rookie draft pick. That doesn't make sense. And Kyle Shanahan said this in the press conference too. When every win means you're one step closer to the 1 seed and every loss means you might be out of the playoffs, you can't afford to just kind of force guys into the lineup. You have to play your best guys. And if your rookies aren't your best guys, sorry, then they don't play. Jordan James is the 3rd running back, not number 2. And, kind of related, stock down for Jordan Watkins. The way that Kyle Shanahan talked about Jordan James was way different than how he talked about Jordan Watkins. With Watkins, it was all about, hey, we need to get him ready. He needs to be ready to play if he wants to play, indicating he probably wasn't very much this season. He got hurt in the very first preseason game against the Denver Broncos, high ankle sprain, we all know this. But then once he was finally back and back in football shape post-injury, he had a setback and was hurt again, right? I mean, we remember this. It was about midway through the season, and it was just tough. It's tough to get Jordan Watkins on the track to play. Shanahan said that Watkins, because of that injury, missed his window to pass guys up. He missed his window to get snaps ahead of Sky Moore, MVS, Kendrick Bourne, right? And by the time he was finally healthy, he was already behind those guys. So it's going to be a big offseason for Jordan Watkins. We shall see what happens. And then some bad news with the rookie class. Alfred Collins injured his shoulder against the Seattle Seahawks, and he may need to have surgery on that shoulder. Hopefully it's nothing too serious. Hopefully he'll be ready to go for training camp. As Mykel Williams is. Apparently Mykel Williams will be good to go for training camp. That's super huge. Bosa's looking good for training camp. That's super huge. Fred Warner will probably be good for training camp. That's super huge. Kittle might take a little bit longer, but they didn't give a specific timeline with Kittle. They did talk about, though, with the roster, they explicitly said, hey, we got to focus on adding speed. And this is something we've talked about on the show, too. The 49ers are an old, slow team. And they're getting younger, and they're getting faster, but they need to do more, right? They need full focus into speed especially. And Kyle Shanahan absolutely acknowledged that. He was like, yeah, that shows up on the tape. That's something we care about, and it's something we're going to address. And they were also talking about bolstering the defensive line. This makes a ton of sense, right? Niners have a lot of free agents on the defensive line. You've got your 2 starting defensive tackles, Jordan Elliott and Kalia Davis, both free agents. Kevin Givens, free agent. Yetur Gross-Matos, free agent. Like, a lot of these guys might not be on the team anymore who played real snaps for you this season. And yeah, you're getting Bosa back and you're getting Mykel Williams back, but there's still holes on that defensive line. And we'll talk about the needs later, but spoiler, defensive line is going to be one of them. Speaking of the defense, there was conversation about the defensive coordinator search. There weren't a ton of specifics. Kyle Shanahan admitted openly that Gus Bradley is probably the best in-house candidate to be defensive coordinator. I think this is nothing new. We all agreed. We talked about this on the past show as well. Like, out of all the guys in the Niners building already, Gus Bradley seems by far the most likely to get the defensive coordinator job. And they did say that they were going to look externally as well. Shanahan didn't say like, he was asked if they were going to cast a wide net, and he said, well, we're not going to cast a wide net. And I'm like, all right, well, okay, Shanahan. But yeah, kind of an eye roll situation there. But he did say they were going to search externally, and it makes sense, right? You've got Jim Schwartz out there who is potentially available, Raheem Morris potentially available. Like, Shanahan would be, I'd be shocked if he didn't have any sort of interest in those 2 guys. So it makes sense. You want to look external, but he did make it very clear that he felt very lucky to have sort of an option like Gus Bradley in the building. And this makes sense because last year they didn't. Last year they didn't have a backup option. They went after Bill Belichick. They went after Pete Carroll. They didn't get either of them, so they were stuck with Nick Sorensen. This year he's going to probably, I would assume, go after Jim Schwartz, go after Raheem Morris. If he doesn't get either of them, probably ends up with Gus Bradley, which is certainly better than Raheem Morris. And Kyle also mentioned he would like to have some consistency at the defensive coordinator position, and it was nice to hear him acknowledge that too, coming up on 5 years in a row of a new defensive coordinator, 5 defensive coordinators in 5 years. Getting pretty sick of talking about defensive coordinator every year, and so is Kyle Shanahan. And then one last thing from the press conference that I thought really stood out to me. John Lynch had a quote. He said, "While I am proud of this team, we have higher standards." And I think that's kind of how most of the fan base feels right now. We can acknowledge that it was a Herculean feat to make it to the divisional round at all, to be within a game of the number 1 seed at all. But this season didn't end the way that it should have, if you're the 49ers, right? This should have been a contending team. And whether it was injuries or what have you, they didn't get it done. The standards are higher. And I agree. You cannot, at a certain point, the excuses run out, right? And the injuries, they suck, and it's unavoidable. But I like that Lynch acknowledged that. He said the standards are higher. We're here to win championships, and we haven't done it yet. The standard is the standard. The standard is championship. And he acknowledged they haven't reached it. So I'm hoping that there's still that focus and the drive to get there, right? And they're not going to settle this offseason. I'm hoping that sort of indicates a level of aggression from the front office that we will see in the moves they make. Now, another thing that Lynch mentioned in the press conference was Brandon Ayuk. There was plenty of Brandon Ayuk conversation in this press conference. Lynch has made it all but obvious that Brandon Ayuk has played his last snap for the San Francisco 49ers. This is surprising to just about nobody. Apparently, he ghosted 49ers coaches and players during the season. Nobody has been able to even get in touch with him. It's just an all-time terrible situation. Like, he gets the contract he wants, everything he wants, tears his ACL after playing pretty bad for a month or two, and then he's gone forever. Honestly, such a shame. Ayuk's going to be one of the biggest what-ifs in my lifetime for the 49ers because he was a special player. He was really that kind of guy. I thought he was absolutely capable of being the number 1 wide receiver. He was paid like it, and the 49ers expected him to be that. But instead, he decided to leave. Just decided to go. I don't know if he's getting bad advice from the people around him. I don't know what the deal is. But clearly doesn't want to be a Niner anymore. So good riddance. Good riddance. John Lynch said that the transaction regarding Brandon Ayuk will come in due time. We'll see if that's a cut. We'll see if they're shopping him for a trade. Maybe Washington is interested with Adam Peters and Jaden Daniels. Maybe the Steelers are interested. They certainly were before his injury. We shall see what happens with Brandon Ayuk. That'll be a storyline this offseason, but I'm hoping that it's a secondary storyline instead of the main storyline again. Now, before we get into some more conversations, I've got a quick little word here from our sponsor, Underdog. Football playoffs are here, and Underdog is the best place to get in on all the gridiron action. Playing on Underdog is easy. Just pick if your favorite players will go higher or lower on stats like touchdowns, rushing yards, receptions, and more. Get them right, and you could win up to 5,000 times your cash. This week on Underdog, I'm looking at the AFC Championship game, and I'm going to pick RJ Harvey for higher than 0.5 rushing or receiving touchdowns, and Drake May for lower than 0.5 interceptions. So what are you waiting for? Download the app today and use promo code FOOTBALLFAN to score $75 in bonus entries when you play your first $5. That's promo code FOOTBALLFAN. Underdog. Make picks, win money.
Must be 18 plus. 19 plus in Alabama and Nebraska. 19 plus in Colorado for some games. 21 plus in Arizona, Massachusetts, and Virginia. And present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. See assets.underdogfantasy.com/play and get terms DFSTML for details. Offer not valid in Maryland, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. In New York, call the 24/7 helpline at 1-878 or text HOMI 467-369.
So Brady, you may be asking, the 49ers aren't playing this weekend, so what should I use all these Underdog bonus entries on? Well, I've got some ideas for you. Of course, Matthew Stafford and the Rams are traveling to Seattle to take on the Seahawks in the NFC Championship game. We will have the previews for both championship games coming up in tomorrow's video, so stay tuned for those. But I want to give you a little sneak peek with some Matthew Stafford stat projections. We've got some higher or lowers on the right side of my screen. You can take a look at those. And you can, if you agree with my projections, if you disagree, you can make your own picks on Underdog. So I want to go over real quick. I think it's clear to everybody that the Rams can put up points on this defense. They've shown that they are more than capable of doing that. And much of the reason for that is Matthew Stafford's arm. Seahawks love to take away the deep ball, as they should. So Stafford will be content to take checkdowns and keep moving the ball efficiently. But I think this strategy is going to give them plenty of success against the Seahawks. So for that reason, I went higher on 255.5 passing yards, higher on 1.5 passing touchdowns, and higher than 21.5 completions. I think Stafford's going to have a good day through the air. However, it won't be perfect. The Seahawks have a talented secondary, and if Stafford's throwing the ball a lot, I could see one getting picked easily. So I went higher on higher than 0.5 interceptions thrown. Although, in the end, I think Matthew Stafford will end up in victory formation, kneeling out the clock to end the game and sending the Rams to the Super Bowl, like I predicted way back at the start of the playoffs. I correctly predicted the NFC Championship game, Rams at Seahawks. And of course, if Stafford ends up in victory formation, that probably means he finishes with negative rushing yards. So I'm going with lower than 0.5 rushing yards for old man Stafford in this game. What do you think of my projections? Do you think I'm wrong on any of these? Let me know down below in the comments section your thoughts. Now, let's get into one more little storyline from the press conference. And we got to talk about the substation, man. We got to talk about this electric substation. I've been trying to avoid this topic on the channel for a couple of reasons, but I think it's just kind of unavoidable now. The 49ers have officially recognized this conspiracy theory in their end-of-year press conference, so I figure I might as well address it here too. If you are unfamiliar, the 49ers practice field, and you can see I'm already getting exasperated by this, the 49ers practice field is right next to an electric substation that provides a ton of power for the stadium, which of course is right by the practice facility, and it makes sense. These areas require a ton of power. Nearly every team in the NFL has some sort of power station within a half mile of their stadium, right? But the 49ers, their practice fields are literally right next to the substation. They are neighboring properties, right? And I have no idea if this matters at all, but there has been a ton of conversation over the past couple of months about if the electromagnetic waves coming from this substation could cause an increase in soft tissue injuries for the 49ers. And listen, I am not a doctor, I'm not a radiologist. This is so far out of my league of understanding that anything I say about it, it's going to be uninformed. So I'm not going to make any sort of predictions or whatever. If you're curious, there's been plenty of articles and discussion about this online. You should certainly look into it if you're curious. I have no idea. Some people say it's a certainty that this is affecting the Niners disproportionately, and some people say, well, they've been there for, however many years. They've been there for decades, and it's only just starting to affect the 49ers in more recent seasons, right? So I don't know what the deal is with the electrical substation. I don't know if it matters, but what I do know is that it is true that it's right next to the practice field. And John Lynch in the press conference was asked about this, and he said, yeah, we've heard about it. We acknowledge that this is a thing that people are talking about, right? We're not going to deny it. And he said, we're asking, quote, anybody and everybody if it is worth making an adjustment, right? Worth changing the spot of practice. John Lynch said him and Jed York were certainly more than willing to switch something up if it meant improving the health and safety of the 49ers players. And I'm glad they're looking into it. That's kind of all I can ask for at this point, is just to sort of try to make adjustments, because the injuries, it's ridiculous, right? Whether it's the substation or whether it's something else, I very much encourage the 49ers to try new things, and because there's really nowhere you can go but up when it comes to the injuries. Now, we got one more topic for this episode, and this is not about the press conference, but this is about my own personal opinions, right? I came up with the 49ers' 5 biggest needs this offseason. These are things that could be addressed in the draft, in free agency, through trades, whatever you want, right? I think these are the 5 positions that the 49ers need to attack. And of course, we've talked about you got to bring speed at every level, right? You've got to bring youth at every level, and toughness and physicality and all that stuff, right? That's important no matter who you're going after. But I do have the 5 positions here that I think the 49ers should take a look at, and then some attributes that I think I'd like them to focus on specifically for those positions. These are out of order. You can put them in whatever order you like, but my first one I want to talk about is wide receiver. This has been a conversation point since August, right? The 49ers really struggled at wide receiver this season. And I think what they need is a guy like Brandon Ayuk, right? They need someone who is explosive, an explosive big play threat who can take the top off the defense, get those 20 to 25-yard chunk plays. Ricky Pearsall showed that he can do this when healthy, right? You need someone who can open up the passing game. You need separators. You need man beaters. Seattle Seahawks were content to run man and just kind of clamp up because they knew that 49ers receivers could not beat man coverage. Ricky Pearsall has shown the ability to do so, but he didn't do great against Seattle. And you could talk about the injury, sure. But regardless, whether Pearsall was injured or not, you need more than one guy who can beat man coverage because it's just not sustainable otherwise. They can devote attention to Pearsall, and then your passing game is dead anyways. So you need explosiveness, you need separators, and you need consistency. That was such a big issue with the 49ers this year. Demarcus Robinson had some flashes, and he had some games with 0 catches, right? Ricky Pearsall had some 100-yard games, and then he missed like 8, Kendrick Bourne had 2 of the highest receiving totals in the NFL this season, and then he was like soft-benched. It was ridiculous. Jawan Jennings had games where like passes would bounce right off his hands and into the defender's lap, and then he would have games where he was the best wide receiver on the field for the 49ers. There was just no consistency with this wide receiver room, and you need that. You need that going into next season. I don't care how you get it, but you better get it. Next up, safety. Safety might be the biggest need on this roster. I think at safety, you need speed, you need range in coverage, and you need tackling. Tackling matters so much for safeties. And of course it does. They're the last line of defense on the defense. If your safeties are missing tackles, your defense is not going to play well. That's kind of a non-negotiable. And guess who missed a ton of tackles this season? the 49ers safeties. That's gotta stop. You need Niners who can trigger to the ball. You need safeties who can cover the back end. You need safeties with range. You need safeties who are smart. And you need safeties who can tackle. I don't care if they can hit, right? I don't care how big they hit, right? Malik Mustafa, big hitter. Marquise Siegel, big hitter. That's great. That's not mandatory for a safety. What is mandatory is safeties who can tackle and safeties who can cover. And speed certainly helps that on the back end. Next up, offensive guard, specifically left guard. I think Spencer Burford, probably a goner. I think someone gives him a big contract this season, and I don't think he returns to San Francisco. So at guard, you got to look for somebody young, because this offensive line in particular is pretty old. Trent's almost 40. Jake Brendel's like 35. Colton McKivitt's nearing 30 already. You need someone young, you need someone strong, and you need someone tough. 49ers really struggled to run inside towards the end of the season. And I think, you can point to a couple factors. That's never been Jake Brendel's strength. Dominic Pooney had some tough games towards the end of the season going up against the Seahawks. Spencer Burford, kind of a one-dimensional player. You could point to all those things individually. But regardless, if you need a yard, the 49ers don't have the interior offensive line trio to get a yard when they need one. And that's something that needs to be addressed. You need to bring in strength and toughness at that left guard spot. I don't know if Connor Colby is that. Connor Colby's got the youth and he's got athleticism, and that's great. But I don't know that he has the strength or toughness just yet. So you may need to look externally for those traits. Number 4 now, defensive tackle. You need 3 down players at defensive tackle. Right now, they have 2 players who are 2 down players, right? You've got Alfred Collins and you've got CJ West, who can be run stuffers in this league. Were they always consistent with it? No. But CJ West looked great to end the year, showed a little pass rush as well, but he's not going to be at least not yet, your primary interior pass rusher. I have to assume we'll probably see a little bit less of the NASCAR package now that Robert Saleh is out the door. So if that's the case, you need actual defensive tackles who can rush the passer, right? And CJ West, his flashes are great, but it's not enough. And him and Alfred Collins are the only defensive tackles who are under contract for next season. Although that's not true. They just did sign Evan Anderson and Sebastian Valdez to futures contracts, but those guys didn't play a singular regular season or playoff snap for the 49ers. So you've got to get guys who can rush the passer and not be total liabilities against the run, right? Because if you're putting out there guys who are like 280 or whatever, and they're just getting bulldozed on 3rd and 3, that undoes all this hard work you did to fix the run defense, right? If you can't stop the run on key downs, you can't stop the run on any down. You know what I mean? If you can't stop the run on 3rd and 17, you can't stop the run. So you need guys who can rush the passer, but you also need guys who can hold their own against the run. You need at least one 3-down player at defensive tackle. And then last but not least, tight end. We don't know when George Kittle's going to be back. They said they expect him back next season. He's not going to miss the entire year, and they expect him to play a relevant role in the team. That's great, but he's not going to be there the entire season, so you need a starting tight end. Jake Tonjes, he's a restricted free agent. Even if you bring him back, he's not a starting tight end. He's a good receiving tight end too. Luke Farrell can't do much of anything. He can't catch the ball. He can't be bothered to prevent a linebacker from catching the ball. And he also can't block. So you need a tight end who can block. You need a tight end who can run and be fast, bring some speed. And you need a tight end who is athletic. This is what they did with George Kittle. They found a freak athlete at tight end who blocked his butt off. And they said, you know what? We're willing to teach the receiving chops. Now, they got very lucky with George Kittle because it turns out he had a lot more receiving chops than Iowa anticipated, and Iowa didn't really use him in the way that the 49ers were planning on, but once he got to the NFL, that was sort of unlocked. I'm not expecting the Niners to get another guy like George Kittle, but you need a guy who can block, you need a guy who can run, and you need a guy who can be just generally athletic, right? So those are my 5 biggest needs for the 49ers this season. Wide receiver, safety, guard, defensive tackle, and tight end at number 5. So that is all for today's episode, folks. What do you think ends up happening with Brandon Ayuk? And do you believe in this electric substation conspiracy theory? Let me know down below in the comments. And of course, let me know if you enjoyed this episode. Leave a comment, leave a like, and let me know if there's any topics that you would like to see me cover. Thank you all for watching, and subscribe for 49ers videos 5 days a week. I'm Brady Grustas, @GrustasBrady on X. This has been Niners Now, and I will see you tomorrow.